Happy New Year, and welcome back to the Behind the Shower Curtain podcast.
What up?
I'm Adam. I'm an attorney. Nothing I'm saying is legal advice.
I'm Taylor. I'm a big true crime fan. Everything I say is legal advice.
It's not. Nothing.
And I have a shirt now that says it on the back. So
shout out Amanda and Natalie. Nothing that either of us is saying is legal advice, despite Taylor's.
Unless you want to take my advice and use it legally.
There's no legal advice. We're back to a two-story segment today. I've got one, T's got one, and you got yours from a listener today,
yes,
right?
Our number one super fan, Maddie, recommended this one.
Maddie.
It is, I had actually never heard of it, which I think it's probably other people have. It sounds like an interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
And yours was also recommended in an email.
Yeah, we got I love when people email us. We got an email from a listener who referenced,
Marcus?
I think that was Marcus, who referenced the hot coffee McDonald's case, which is one that I think a lot of people have misconceptions about. And nothing I'm saying is legal advice, but I'm going to get into a lot of misconceptions people have about the way that civil litigation works, because I think a lot of people don't get it, and I think this might help people understand it better, especially that case in particular.
Sounds fun.
Oh, well, when you say it that way, it'll be fun, I promise, because you can get a lot of money. So money's always fun.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Yeah, says the girl who always says when we cross the street, I hope I get hit by a car so we can get paid out.
No, I'm just trying to pay off my student loans, you guys. And
Respect.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Just hit us.
Okay, so I'm going to get into it. My story recommended by Maddie is about Erin Caffey. So my sources were Oxygen, Murderpedia, and Medium.com. The background: Erin Caffey was raised in a conservative family in Alba, Texas by parents Terry and Penny Caffey, and she had two brothers, Tyler, who was 8 years old, and Matthew, who was 13 years old. The family moved to Celeste, Texas when Erin was 13, so they could be closer to a conservative Baptist church that they were both ministers at, so they worked there.
Cool.
Erin started her 8th grade year at a public school, but her parents abruptly pulled her out after a girl tried to kiss Erin at school.
A girl tried to
kiss her.
Okay.
And her parents are conservative, so they're not into lesbianism.
So they pulled her out of school?
Yeah, she was like, you're a heathen.
That's
public school breeds lesbians. We're going to homeschool you.
I just said Jesus in reference to that. That's absurd.
Penny, Erin's mom, began to homeschool her using a Bible-based curriculum. So no evolution taught at that house. Awesome.
Bible-based curriculum. Love it.
When Erin turned 16 in July of 2007, she was allowed to get a job at the local Sonic, which is where they roller skate out your food.
Hot dogs, baby. Come on.
One of her coworkers commented that Erin was so sheltered and it was like she was seeing the world for the first time.
I wonder why.
Erin meets her soon-to-be boyfriend, Charlie Wilkinson, at work. He was a customer, and she skated out to him with her food, and it was love at first sight.
Wind in her hair.
Yep.
He said, let me get those digits.
That's right.
Right.
Charlie was a high school senior who was known to be hot-tempered but had no previous arrests or serious discipline at school. Erin's parents obviously didn't approve.
What? That's a surprise.
But in December that year, Erin asked her parents to return to public school, and after they agreed, she and Wilkinson, that's Charlie, became inseparable. So that's when she mostly saw him. Erin and Charlie didn't really care that her parents didn't approve, and after a few months of dating, Charlie presented Erin with his grandmother's, sources vary, but it was either his grandmother's engagement ring.
Whoa.
To be engaged, or as a promise ring, and it was just one of his grandmother's rings. But
I hate the term promise ring. It's like my least favorite term.
He did tell his friends that him and Erin would get married eventually.
Wow, that's pretty quick.
Erin's parents flipped their lids and started limiting Erin's time with Charlie to once a week at their house under their supervision. Erin, of course, found this to be terrible, and she planned to run away. In February of 2008, Erin is grounded for talking to Charlie without permission, and she has her keys and phone taken away.
Classic parent punishment.
Her parents also tell Erin she needs to break up with Charlie, and they seem to think that Erin agrees to doing so. This is when Erin decides she needs to take drastic measures so she can be with Charlie, and she tells Charlie that killing her parents is their best option.
Well, that took a very dark turn.
Mm-hmm. Charlie agrees, and they hash out a plan, including one of his friends, to help him kill her parents.
I love how casually we can say that on a podcast. Like, oh, yeah, she suggested that the only way we could get out is killing them, and he agreed. And then here we are. It's just funny how casual it can be.
Have you heard this podcast
I know.
before?
It's just fun. I'm enjoying myself.
Allegedly, Charlie tells Erin that he'll have to kill her younger brothers also, so there aren't any witnesses. And Erin says, quote, "I don't care. Just do what you got to do." Awesome.
Ruthless.
So, on March 1st, 2008, 2 days after being grounded, Charlie pulled up outside Erin's parents' house in the middle of the night. He had two friends with him, Charles Allen Wade, 20 years old, and Wade's 18-year-old girlfriend, Bobby Gail Johnson.
Murder buddies.
Mm-hmm. Erin runs outside to meet the group, and she sits in the car with Bobby while Charlie and Charles enter her parents' house. They go into her parents' bedroom, and they start shooting recklessly.
Oh, my God.
They shot her mother, Penny, and her father, Terry. This is their conflicting reports, but it was either 5 to 11 times. Either way,
That's
it was a
lot.
lot.
Right.
They had a samurai sword, which is, why do you have that?
If you have a gun, what do you need a samurai sword for?
I
Also, I was about to ask you where they got the guns from, and then I realized it's Texas, so.
Right. They probably had it from their parents who don't
Right.
keep it locked up. Sorry, Texas. They had a samurai sword from God knows where, and they stabbed Penny with it in the neck, almost decapitating her.
Oy, oy, oy.
Yeah.
That's brutal.
It's not great.
No.
They then go to her brother's rooms and they shoot Matthew, and they took turns stabbing her other brother,
Took
Tyler.
turns.
Yeah, it's gross. Wilkinson and Wade then ransacked the house for valuables because Charlie had allegedly promised Charles $2,000 that was stashed away, and then they set fire to the whole house with lighter fluid.
Wow.
Miraculously, Erin's father, Terry, did not die.
No way.
And he wakes up from being unconscious to find the house on fire. So he has to get out, obviously. He ends up crawling like out a window.
What a legend.
Yeah, he gets out and he crawls an hour away to his neighbor, Tommy Gaston's house, who calls 911.
So they must have been living pretty far from
Yeah, they were like
else.
kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
So he army crawled with bullet wounds.
Yeah, with at
for an
least
hour.
5, maybe 11.
What a legend. That's so, I mean, I can't even imagine having
I
to go
know.
through something like that.
It's crazy. Terry was taken to East Texas Medical Center and admitted to the critical care unit, of course. After emergency surgery, Terry was stable enough to talk, and he told sheriff's deputies that he was certain one of the attackers was Charlie because he recognized his voice. Roughly 3 hours later, authorities took Charlie, Charles, and Bobby into custody. So that's the 3 that were in the car and came over. Erin was found hiding inside a trailer that belonged to Charles's older brother. Erin was not initially considered a suspect, but during police questioning, Charles told police he had been promised $2,000 for helping, quote, take care of business in the murders. According to police, all of the statements given by Charlie and Charles and Bobby were the same. The murders were Erin's idea.
Well, she's screwed.
Yeah. Charlie told investigators that he had initially encouraged Erin to run away from home, but she told him, "No, I want my mom and dad killed." According to police interview audio featured on Killer Couples. So
Killer Couples?
Yeah, that's just
That's
a show.
a cool name.
I did not watch the episode, but I think that's what Maddie watched. So if anyone's interested, Killer Couples.
All right.
She was arrested while she was on the way to visit her father at the hospital. All 4 defendants were
Ew, that's gross.
She was literally going to the hospital, and she was accompanied by her grandmother and sheriffs because her father was just murdered.
Right.
Her whole family was just murdered.
Figure they're in danger. They could be in danger.
Yeah. So she was arrested on the way, and she's telling her grandmother she had nothing to do with it, whatever.
Full of it.
while I wrote, I don't know what this means, but I wrote, while waiting for trial or whatever, defense attorneys confirmed.
Is that what they said in court?
Because she was like, it was the time where you're not technically like guilty of a crime, but you're in jail waiting for.
Yeah, sure. So you've been charged with the crime. You don't have bail, so you're just chilling in basically a holding cell or a jail cell until it's your time for trial.
So during that period, defense attorneys confirmed that Terry Caffey testified on his daughter's behalf, asking that she be allowed to go home with him rather than staying in juvenile custody. And
what?
Yeah. Erin's grandmother also testified for her, but neither testimony would sway the judge, who ordered Erin to continue to be held for another 15 days. Thank God. In October 2008, Charlie and Charles are sentenced to life in prison, but escaped the death penalty by pleading guilty, and Terry Caffey requested that death penalty not be on the table.
Wow. It's an interesting attitude this guy has about.
I think it's because he's religious and
the forgiveness portion.
Right, exactly.
I mean, whatever you feel is how you feel. I just think
they just slaughtered your whole family, so it seems wild to me.
You don't hear about that often.
Yeah, some people though. I know there was another big case where the mom like had lunch with the person who did it after the fact, and she just said it was too much of her energy to keep being mad and upset at this person.
That's fair. I mean, it's a very emotional time. Like I said, I always say I don't know how I would react in these situations.
Right. No one does.
No one knows what they would do, so it's hard for us to judge how anybody acts. So, I mean, as long as he's doing what he thinks is right for him, then good for him. Yeah.
On January 3rd, 2009, Erin Caffey agrees to a plea deal that could make her eligible for parole when she's 59.
Ooh.
She had been scheduled to She had been scheduled to be tried as an adult about a month later before she took the plea deal. So
probably a good idea.
Yeah, I don't think she would have fared very well.
I mean, look, they call it a plea deal for a reason. It's better than what you would get if you're found guilty of the crimes.
Right. And I'm not even getting into all of the trial because it's so clearly obvious that she did it and her boyfriend did it. There's mounds of evidence.
Right. And plus, I mean, when you plead guilty, there is no trial. All you have typically is if there's a disagreement over sentencing. Like maybe there hasn't been a deal, but you want to plead guilty, but you still want the judge to maybe figure out the sentence. I don't know. There's weird ways that can happen. But when somebody pleads guilty, there's no drama. It's, hey, I did it, and here's what my sentence is going to be, and that's it.
Right.
You don't get all of the cool theatrics and all of that you would get in a criminal case with all the jury and the exhibits and the oohs and ahs and all that stuff.
Right. Bobby, the girlfriend, was named as an accomplice who did not use a weapon and was sentenced, guess how many years?
So Bobby was
the girlfriend who was just sitting in the car with Erin when it was happening. So her and Erin never even went in the house.
So Erin's involvement I get because Erin was the one who orchestrated this entire thing.
Correct.
So she was just in the car?
Yeah, Bobby literally went for a drive with her boyfriend, and then her boyfriend committed mass murder.
What did she get?
You guess first. Just guess.
A couple years?
She got 40 years.
40 years?
40 years in prison.
She didn't do anything,
and may be eligible for parole in 20 years.
For just
exactly.
being in the car?
And this is great because I knew Adam would react that way, and I've been waiting to bring this back up. But whenever I talk about a bank robbery and the robber going in and killing someone, Adam's like, yeah, the person driving the car should get in trouble for what's happening.
Different.
It's not different. She knew what they were doing.
She knew?
She knew what they were doing. But she was just in the car.
Let me think about this for a second.
Stumped Adam. I was very excited when I saw that because I was like, that seems insane that she got that much time. But Adam always says, if you're going into it and you know what's happening, you're responsible, right?
You have an agreement to do it, right? But if she had no involvement, I mean, unless there was evidence or testimony that she was also involved in like the planning.
There was nothing like that.
There was nothing like that. And she didn't go in the house. She was in the car the whole time. Did she
the whole time.
Did she lie to police about anything? Not that would get you 40 years.
Not that was shown.
Do you know what she was charged with ultimately?
Just as an accomplice. It said named as an accomplice to murder, I guess. So whatever, they were charged with 3 counts of murder.
Yeah, I would want to know what. Maybe I'll look this up for the beginning of the next podcast. I'd want to know what the accomplice related law is in Texas because it could be different than other places.
Yeah, Texas might be a little harder on people.
It's hard because, and the other thing I talk about with that bank robber example is we always talk about conspiracy, right? It's intent to commit a crime, and then you're responsible for all of the natural crimes that flow out of that conspiracy. Right. But there's also like felony murder, right? If you're committing a felony and then someone who's with you ends up, killing somebody, right? So that's another thing. But in this scenario, she was just in the car. She didn't get out. She didn't help plan. She didn't kill anyone.
40 years. She didn't stop it. As far as I'm concerned, good. You deserve it. You could have called the police right then and said,
she knew
this
it was
is
going
what's
on
happening.
and she did nothing. But is that a crime? I mean,
I think letting 3 murders happen is a crime, especially when it's not even like the bystander effect when you see something happening and you don't do anything about it. But she knew ahead of time what was about to happen. So she had plenty of time to intervene and still keep her own safety. She's just a scumbag. I don't know how I
feel about
40 years does seem crazy to me, but
for doing nothing basically.
But yeah, she did nothing.
Like her actions were zero. Granted, her knowledge was something, but her actions were zero. I'd want to read the statute.
I just feel like you have some kind of responsibility to call the police when there's a crime occurring.
Ethically, but legally.
Legally, if your boyfriend tells you he's going to go murder 3 people, you don't have any responsibility to.
That's what I'd like to look up in Texas to see what the law says about.
Adam's flipping sides because
What do you mean?
For the bank robber, you're down to fit that person.
That's conspiracy.
The driver.
Yeah.
So what is she?
Was she involved?
She was in the car.
Did she plan it?
No. But what if a bank robber? What if I'm just driving?
You're driving.
You to a bank.
Part of the
what
getaway.
if I'm just driving you to the bank and I don't know what you're about to do?
You don't have the knowledge, then you shouldn't be charged with it.
Okay.
But the way we've described it in the example is
right,
you're the getaway driver, right?
What if I'm just in the car and I know what you're doing?
And
right.
That's what I'd want to look up. I'm not sure.
In the bank robber scenario, you're saying if I'm in the car and I know,
right,
I shouldn't have any responsibility?
Well, it's hard for me to deal with an example where you know what's going on, but you had no hand in planning it at all. Right? You just end up in a car where you know what's happening.
No, she knew ahead of time. That's what I'm saying. She didn't help plan it, but they were planning it around her.
To me, that's a strange example. Like I don't know if I've seen a case like that where someone's in the car, but they have no involvement at all. It's a weird.
All right, we're about to lose our listeners at this point. It's been 5 minutes.
We're going through this weird bank robbery.
If anyone has an opinion on if she should have gotten 40 years or not, let us know.
Too many.
Terry regularly visits his daughter and doesn't think she was actually the mastermind, but that she was manipulated by her older psychotic boyfriend.
Sounds about right.
It sounds not right to me. I think it sounds like a dad who's in denial.
That's what I meant.
And then just as an aside, piggybacking off of that, another former boyfriend, Michael Washburn, claimed he was told by Erin she wanted her family dead.
That's a lot of good evidence.
So that's premeditation if I've ever heard it.
For sure.
All right, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thanks, Maddie, for the wreck. It was a wild ride.
That was the first one, I think, where we've had a murder where the house was lit on fire afterward.
Yes.
Dang. So I'm still getting over the fact that the house was on fire. He got shot a bunch of times.
And he lived.
And he crawled out of the burning
house. An hour
house.
away. What a champion.
What a legend.
Yeah.
Dang, that's sick.
Yep.
That was a good one, T. I like that one.
Thank you.
All right. So like I said at the top, I'm going to do the McDonald's coffee cup case, the infamous McDonald's coffee cup case about the woman who spilled coffee and got a large payout. So in this one, there's actually a documentary that was made about it, but it's really more about the fallout from the case and what happened after it from a legislative standpoint, and not really, it's not like an hour and a half about a woman spilling coffee on herself. I'm not sure you could get an hour and a half out of that. I didn't even watch the entire thing because a lot of it afterward is about laws and things like that, things that might not interest our listeners that much but interest me. So I used this hot coffee documentary that I watched and just 2 quick articles that I found. One was from the American Museum of Tort Law, so it's tortmuseum.org, and the other one was from rosenfeldinjurylawyers.com.
Wow.
And what'll happen is you just look up like a case and there'll be a bunch of law firms that have written articles about it to like bring you to their website. So that's where that one came from.
That's smart.
Yeah. So the case is Liebeck versus McDonald's. So on February 27th, 1992, that was what? You were born 6 days after that? Or 6 days before that? Stella Liebeck was driving with her grandson in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this is funny. I didn't know how to spell Albuquerque, so I wrote ALBA-KURKY. So I knew how to say it. Stella was 79 years old at the time. The two of them decided to head over to McDonald's and go through the drive-thru. Remember that the grandson was actually the one driving the car. Stella was in the passenger seat. There's a misconception that she was driving. That's not true. She was working full-time until roughly a week before this incident occurred. Christopher Tiano was the grandson. They had just dropped somebody off at the airport. They were heading over to Mickey D's. Chris was going to get some food. Grandma was going to get some coffee. They bought some coffee. There were no cup holders in this guy's car. It was like a 1989 car before cup holders were, I guess, a big thing in vehicles.
Wow.
They grabbed some cream and sugar, as you do when you get coffee, and then they pulled over in the parking lot.
Unless you're a certified serial killer and you drink it black.
That's right. They pulled over in the parking lot to get situated, which is something that we would probably do if we were eating in the car. Just pull into the parking lot real quick, get your food out so you can drive safely while shoving a double quarter pounder in your mouth.
Normal behavior.
Very. So Stella gets her coffee. Chris is getting his food out of the bag. The next thing Chris knows, his grandma is screaming bloody murder, right?
Yikes.
She placed the coffee in between her legs, so like in between her inner thighs, and I guess she tried to take the lid off of the coffee cup to put the cream and sugar inside, and it spilled all over her lap. So it runs down her inner thighs, like goes underneath the seat to like her butt and her groin area, and it's just like the worst. I mean, if it was not the hottest cup of coffee,
Yeah, even if it was just a
right?
normally hot cup of coffee, that would be awful.
Right, I know what you're thinking. Okay, so she spilled a cup of coffee on herself. It sucks. She probably got a little burnt, but whatever. The pictures are disgusting.
Ew.
Okay, like the skin looks fried. She had to have a bunch of skin grafting done where they take skin from one place and put it in another place.
Oh my gosh.
It was literally like her whole area down there was just like 3rd-degree burns, the worst burns you could get.
That's wild.
I mean, you might want to take a look at the documentary just to get an idea of what it looks like, but it was nasty. And this is a 79-year-old grandma. You just feel terrible for her. She was burned so badly, the nurses were shocked. She was run right over to the hospital because as a nurse, you hear, oh, she spilled coffee on herself. All right. And then she gets there, and then that is going on.
Right.
And you're like, holy crap, right? So Stella, after this, is thinking, all right, well, maybe McDonald's will just cover my medical expenses, and I'll be good to go. So a letter was written on her behalf to ask for the medical expenses to be covered. And this is usually called a demand letter. It's like before you file suit against anybody or anything like that, you send a letter opening up a negotiation to try to just settle it. And that way you don't have to worry about going to court. And as part of that settlement agreement, you agree not to sue, right? It's a settlement. So a letter was written on her behalf just for the medical expenses and to let them know that their machines are probably too hot. And if this is a policy, it needs to be looked at so it doesn't happen to other people, right? Stella had $10,000 in medical expenses for the surgeries she had to have and the skin grafting and things like that. So that was all she wanted back was her medical expenses.
Which, let's just point out, McDonald's is $1 billion company.
Right.
That is nothing. That is nothing. That's like 3 seconds of work for them.
McDonald's offered her $800 in
Oh
response.
my God. I hate McDonald's.
So in order to recover, Liebeck has to prove that McDonald's acted in a negligent manner, right? They didn't act reasonably. They have a duty to their customers to provide them with safe food and drink products. They violate that when they serve coffee that's scalding hot, more than a reasonable person would expect when they spill it. And then that causes serious injury. That's enough to get you where you need to be for settlement or for court purposes.
Wait, you guys, I'm not over the
$800
scumbagginess of McDonald's. So I just Googled McDonald's profit in 1992 because obviously today's a little bit different. $958.6 million.
Yeah, she
so
wanted
literally
10K for
nothing.
for her burnt legs and butt as a 79-year-old lady. So
corporate America, you scumbags.
The documentary then jumps into how civil litigation works and how you can sue companies and things like that. But I'm just going to jump into some things that I think people don't understand about this situation. Yeah. And we had this discussion when we first started dating way back, that the main misconception I found that people have and weren't familiar with this area is that if you've been hurt or injured, you don't have to pay for your attorney.
Right.
That's not how it works, right? So in the vast majority of civil litigation law firms, they don't take any money from you, right? They only get paid if you get paid, which is why if you don't have a great case, they don't take it. It's called a contingency fee. So basically, you go into the lawyer's office, hey, I was in the drive-thru, I spilled coffee on myself. These are my burns. These are the pictures. The lawyer looks at it. When you describe the facts, they think, is this a case I think I can win? If he or she thinks it's a case they can win, they take it. Typically, if you settle the case, the lawyer will get 33% of whatever they settle it for. And know that insurance companies and companies that settle cases know that, right? And then if you go to trial, typically it's a little bit higher because there's way more risk in going to trial and way more expenses. But typically this expenses would also come out of the award that you would get. So typically that's like 40%. But it can be less if you have like a referral fee or if you know the lawyer or whatever, right? But typically if you are hurt, and this is not legal advice, but if you are hurt, it's always better to at least call to figure out if you have a case, because if you do, no sweat. The lawyer's going to take care of it. You chill. Right. And then if you have a good case, then bang, you're going to get compensated, right? So anyway, about 90% of cases actually settle out of court. So the vast majority of these civil cases are never going to trial.
Right,
They're
because
just
these
settled between
scumbag
lawyers.
companies don't want it going to be in the press for weeks or however long it takes for it to get
That's one
figured
side,
out.
but it also works both ways, right? So as a plaintiff, and that's the person who's suing, if you go to trial, you're risking what if I lose, right? And as a defendant, the person who's being sued, if I go to trial, you're also risking what if I lose. And typically when you're in court, what you'll have to pay as a defendant will usually be higher than what you'll do when you settle the case.
Sure.
So there's a lot of back and forth. It always depends on the circumstances and the facts. That's always my answer, is it depends.
I just think that in that scenario, it's always favoring the defendant to just settle out of court.
Not because if that was the case, settlements wouldn't happen all the time, right? But sometimes, one, settlements, you get the money to your client quicker if they need it more quickly. Number two.
No, I'm not saying it doesn't also benefit the plaintiff.
Yeah,
I'm just saying it's not the defendant. It's not McDonald's saying, we know we messed up, here's some money. It's them saying, we don't want to deal with this anymore or fix our policies, so we're just going to pay you for it.
And sometimes what they'll do is they'll include a confidentiality agreement, which means that once you get paid, you can't discuss it openly with anyone, right? This is how problems can occur sometimes. Anyway, so Liebeck decides to sue McDonald's. So when you sue someone, you get information from that other party, which is called discovery. We've talked about this before. You request documents from them. You ask them to answer specific questions. You ask for company policies. You can basically ask for whatever you want, and they have to give it to you, barring some sort of legal objection or some confidentiality that would exist. Like you can't ask McDonald's for their formula for something because it would be a trade secret, right?
Sure.
So once you get all of that info, you review it and you see what you have, and you hope as a plaintiff's attorney that I have a good case that I can win. So Liebeck's attorney gets McDonald's policy for coffee. The policy says that the holding temperature for the coffee inside the machine, so you hit the button, the coffee comes out, is at 180 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's hot.
That's not a joke, right? That is really, really hot. And a doctor on the documentary who's testifying for the plaintiff said this is going to easily cause a second degree or maybe third degree burn if the 180 degree liquid comes in contact with your skin.
Just for reference, the boiling point of water is 212.
Right.
So that's very close.
Really hot, right? So she had burns on her groin, her butt, her thighs, and she was wearing cotton pants. So we're talking like cotton sweats. And you would think that it would kind of pool up and sit, and then it would stay on your skin. There's really no way for you to get relief other than just like grabbing it and trying to pull it out with your fingers to try to get it off of your skin. So it's going to sit on there. It's awful. So what happens in these cases is the jury has to decide who's at fault. Was this McDonald's fault or was this Liebeck's fault? And in some jurisdictions, a couple, Maryland included, if you are contributorily negligent at all, like 1%, meaning if your actions led in any percentage to your own injury, you don't get to recover anything.
Like taking the top off of the coffee.
Like spilling the coffee on yourself.
Right.
Right. So let's say
So in Maryland, she would not have gotten money for this.
Yeah. Let's say that you're crossing the street and it's a crosswalk, but the hand sign is up.
Right.
And then a drunk driver comes around the corner, speeding, texting, eating, not paying attention, doing drugs on the steering wheel, and then kills you. Your estate wouldn't be able to recover because you were contributorily negligent for crossing the street.
You think in that exact scenario,
Maybe
that's
not
what's
that
gonna
exact
happen?
scenario.
I don't think so.
And that's not legal advice. But that's the idea, is that even if you're a little bit negligent, it's a complete bar to recovery.
Right.
You don't get anything. And that's only, I think it's like in 3 and 4 states now. Most of them have, gone into the 21st century at this point.
But not Maryland?
But not Maryland.
So I can't even get my student loans paid by jumping in front of
You
someone.
can, no, not generally. So, which to me, like I said, is kind of nuts. But in most jurisdictions, the fault is proportional, which means that if the plaintiff is 35% at fault, the defendant is 65% at fault, the plaintiff can still recover for that 65%, which is just lower than if it was their fault completely, which makes
that
total
seems
sense.
reasonable.
Right? The jury in this case assigned Liebeck 20% of the blame and McDonald's 80% of the blame, which means she can recover for the 80% liability. A juror who was on the documentary stated that this was because there was a large history of people getting burned by these coffee cups, some 700 people or something like that.
Jeez.
So the juror said that they knew there was a problem and they acted totally indifferently to Liebeck and to the others based on, I guess, the testimony that they gave in trial or in depositions. So think about McDonald's here. You can always make the argument that any reasonable company would know that 180 degrees is too hot to serve coffee.
Right.
But even better than that is a situation where you have 700 company documented previous cases of the same situation.
And then you still didn't
and you
change
still
it.
don't change it, right? So that's way worse than just, oh, I know that's going to be too hot, right? 2 days worth of coffee sales, according to the juror, that's what they thought would be fair for punitive damages. That's $2.7 million.
Wow.
2 days of coffee sales, right? So they award her, I think it was like 2.86, and it was like $160K for her medical expenses.
They should have just paid that $10,000, dummies.
Right. So there are differences in damages. There are what's called compensatory damages, which are supposed to just make you whole. My medical expenses were this amount, so to make me whole, I need this amount to cover them. And then those are actual compensatory damages. Then there can be non-economic damages, which are for pain and suffering. And those are tough to put into numbers, right? How do you quantify someone's pain, right? It's difficult. Someone who is hurt more is going to suffer more, but it's always hard to put a number on someone's pain. It's just not an easy thing to quantify. Then there are punitive damages, which is what they awarded in this case, $2.7 million worth, which you don't see very often, at least in most cases. Punitive damages are meant to basically punish the wrongdoer and essentially make them pay a fine for their actions to ensure that people won't suffer the same harm that this plaintiff did, to make them correct it. $2.7 million, all in punitive damages. That was the initial award that Liebeck got, right?
Okay.
So Liebeck and this jury become like a total laughing stock in the public. And the quotes from the stories are like, woman gets $3 million because coffee was too hot, right? And you hear that headline, you're like, what? Like she had spilled coffee on herself and she got $3 million? It makes it look like a total joke. And this case pops up everywhere, especially when big companies now are trying to change the law in when and how plaintiffs can come to court. And what they want to do is put like caps on the amount of damages you can recover and things like that. And this case was used as an example by those bigger corporations to show that, hey, these frivolous lawsuits are getting ridiculous. This case is absurd. This shouldn't be happening. We need to change the law. When in reality, I mean, the case was correct.
Third-degree burns. Was
$2.7 million a lot? Yeah, but
not in relation to how much McDonald's makes every year.
And it wasn't a frivolous lawsuit because they were negligent. They were absolutely negligent, right? So this bill then passes through the Senate to limit the rights of people to sue in certain scenarios against these big corporations, but it was vetoed by President Clinton at the time. It doesn't pass.
Nice.
So the corporations then start going after state legislators, right? And there are major PR efforts to start getting people on board with this legislative push to limit lawsuits. And the quotes are like, no more $1 million cups of coffee and things like that. So this case is really like the catalyst and the main like center around this entire PR situation. And all these massive corporations team up together to try to get these changes made that would benefit all of them. And they were calling it lawsuit abuse. And the claim that all these frivolous lawsuits are getting through and awards are being given to people who don't deserve them, and it's going to bankrupt business and ultimately hurt the economy in America and all that stuff. Bush, when he was elected, actually pushed, they ended up calling it tort reform, all over the place. Too many lawsuits are hurting good businesses, things like that.
Yeah, McDonald's, that good old business that never hurt anybody, pays their workers right, never has a sexual assault accusation.
Anything else you want to throw out there?
That's it.
All right.
I'm done.
So this PR and all this stuff leads to legislation where now caps are being placed on damages, meaning in a certain case, in a certain jurisdiction, you can only pay maximum this amount to this plaintiff, or limiting the ways you can sue or when you can sue. And this is a thing in pretty much every state. There are caps on the amount that you can recover. Granted, those caps are generally now pretty high and can vary from case to case. But in good practice, the reason for the caps, let's say a jury awards someone $50 million in a case with $1,000 in medical expenses, right? I mean, that's insane. You might think...
Yeah, but there's emotional damage.
You might think, yikes, that's too much, right? And the caps are not just on economic damages. They're on economic, non-economic, punitive, and in some cases, I think a few states, it's on total damages. So to me, the caps can sometimes be messed up, and they were a little bit more messed up back in the 90s before we knew what we were doing, because you literally can't get enough to right the wrong that's been done to you in some circumstances. And this was, like I said, more of an issue back in the day. Like, imagine I have a son, and that son has a birth defect directly caused by a mistake made by the doctor, right?
Right. No amount of money is going to change.
Well, and I have to spend, and my son is now, has a deformity or some sort of really bad medical condition that I'm going to have to pay for the rest of my life.
Right.
And I have to spend $50K a year in medical expenses, but the cap says I can only get $1 million. right?
Right.
Think about it. So I would be through that $1 million in 20 years. And when my son is 20, I would have to pay for all of his continuous $50,000 a year medical expenses until the end of his life.
Right.
That's not fair.
It's not fair.
So another limiting way that people would try to prevent people from suing was making them go through mandatory arbitration instead of going through the courts. And arbitration is just a fancy way to say it's both parties in the room with a set of ground rules and an arbitrator who decides what's fair and what's not. The problem is the clauses that would go into these arbitration agreements would favor the company, like,
of course,
by a lot, right?
Because
the
capitalism.
Company, right. The company gets to pick the arbitrator, and the arbitrator will be someone who's pro-business. The company will get to set the ground rules in the arbitration. The company will get to decide what evidence is admissible and what evidence is not, right? So it's,
it's also just unfair.
That's ultimately
if you
what I'm
are
getting
going into a room, a big conference room, a little 79-year-old lady, and you're going up against McDonald's and their legal team, right. You're just going to feel intimidated and bullied.
Absolutely. Right. And arbitration agreements have been something that have been scrutinized over the last 20 years in the legal field, and I think they're making their way out, at least from mandatory perspective,
sure.
Right? There are plenty of times when a consensual arbitration can be a good idea, but really this was just a push by these companies to keep people out of court and get them into an arena where they would have certain advantages.
Right.
So now the last 30 years, like I said, I think a lot of that's been fixed, but what's crazy is how this McDonald's case set this whole thing off about lawsuit abuse and all of this stuff. Ultimately, the $2.9 million award that she got was lowered to about $640,000. And that can happen, right? A judge will review the award that's given by the jury, and if he or she thinks that that award does not make logical sense based on the facts of the case, then it can be lowered. And then if you want, you can appeal it, and that appeal would be reviewed by an appellate court, and you can go that route, right? So I guess I think the jury determined she had $160,000 in medical expenses, so she still would have gotten about $500K for pain, suffering, punitive damages, all that stuff, right? So she gets $640K at the end of the day when McDonald's offer her $800. So not a great investment on McDonald's part. She only asked for her medical expenses originally, so obviously all they had to do was just agree to that at the very beginning, and none of this would have happened. And who knows, from a legislative standpoint, this whole movement might have been pushed down a little bit further.
Yeah, until someone else got McDonald's burns.
Or another large company, right? I mean, who knows what would have happened. So I think the crazy part is how we still hear about this case all the time, like the guy who emailed us and Marcus. And
well, he was calling me out, just for full disclosure, because I am one of those people who I see something like that. The McDonald's one everyone knows about, which is why I referenced it in that episode. But you just see it and it's like caution hot, and it's like, well, no shit. Or when you're outside of an alligator enclosure and they're like, don't put your children in there, and it's like, who put their child in here that this had to be a sign?
Someone did.
Right. But so I wasn't making light of her 3rd-degree burns. I'm making light of when those things have to be placed somewhere because someone did something to cause it.
You never know.
No company is putting stuff like that for the good of society. They're doing it because they had an issue.
Right. But think about it. Because we have the threat of lawsuits, it makes us overall safer as a society.
Of course.
Right? So if you violate this reasonable care standard, then you're screwed.
As you should be.
It's just funny because you think, I'll just spill coffee on myself and I'll get $3 million, right? Like if we went to Starbucks this morning and you spilled coffee on your lap and the coffee was at a normal temperature and it sucked and you got a little bit burnt, okay, sorry, but you're not going to get $3 million for that.
Sure.
You need basically a perfect storm of things to happen, right?
You also need that cup to not say that it's hot.
Number one, yes, but you need scalding hot coffee.
Right.
You need a company that shows you no sympathy in court. You need the right sympathetic jury. And you need to be in the right jurisdiction, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that go along here. And I know you always talk about how from a criminal standpoint, you would never take a jury trial.
I wouldn't, because juries are dumb.
A civil standpoint, if you're suing someone.
You should, because juries are dumb and emotional.
That's not legal advice. But depending on what jurisdiction you're in, oftentimes a jury is a way better route to go.
Right, because they're going to side with the grandma over McDonald's.
You have imagine you have someone who's had a misdiagnosis of cancer and is at the table in the courtroom on oxygen and looks horrible, and
you want that
then
jury.
You have a doctor or a hospital there, and they've got all
suits
their lawyers and even if their case is strong, it's hard to get past the image that you're looking at in the trial, which
but that's why you would pick a jury in that scenario, because a judge would get past how it looks.
They shouldn't be influenced by that, right?
Right.
I mean, you would hope that a judge wouldn't be.
No, the judge wouldn't. I'm saying
right.
the jury
exactly.
would.
Right. Yeah. But once again, it always depends on the jurisdiction
Sure,
you're
of course.
in. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. So I just wanted to use that case as a segue to maybe help some people who may not understand how that process works.
Yeah, I love that. That's interesting to me.
Yeah.
So
that's about it.
awesome job.
Thanks. Nothing like a little legal lesson that's not legal advice on a Tuesday morning. So.
Yeah, if you guys have other cases like that where it's a weird law or something, write in and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and I'll take a look at it and see what I think.
Or we won't.
Yeah, or we just won't listen to you at all.
Thanks so much for listening. First episode of the new year.
Bingo, 2021.
Happy Tuesday.
Yeah, Behind the Shower Curtain on Instagram, BTSC Podcast on Twitter.
Behind the Shower Curtain Pod at Gmail if you have recommendations.
Yeah, and also we're just gonna. This is what I'm gonna do. I haven't told you about this yet. Is we got a couple shirts from a couple friends. I just ordered a sample shirt from Taylor. For Taylor, if you want one, I'm just gonna give a couple away. So just email us and let me know that you want a shirt, and I'll get your size, and I'll just send you one.
The first 4 people who email get a shirt for free.
So just email us at behindtheshowercurtainpod@gmail.com, and it's on us. I'll just send you a few shirts. So let me know, and I'll try to get that to you guys within a month or so. Shipping sucks right now because of COVID, but I'll get it to you as quick as I can. So as always, thank you for listening, and
don't forget to check Behind the Shower Curtain.
Don't forget to check.